Brett, the out-of-home baker. Normally you find me here on this channel baking cakes, but today I'm showing you how to bake bread. This is something that I said for years I just can't make. I would tell people I can't make bread. I just can't do it. But a few months ago, when bread started getting really expensive and also my son started having some really complicated digestive issues where I needed to be able to feed him something that was going to help him just function a little bit better with his bodily systems, and the store-bought processed bread that we were buying just wasn't doing it. It was clogging him up and it was getting really expensive, and so I decided it was time to find a recipe that worked, and I found one. And this bread recipe is awesome because A, it makes bread that is super soft. I found that a lot of homemade bread recipes feel very dry and they get very crusty, and so you end up like not even being able to eat half of it because it's so crusty and hard and just very dried out. But this recipe is very soft, very moist, and you'll be able to even eat the crust. My kiddo eats the entire thing when I pack it in his lunch. So I'm making this whole wheat bread today, and I'm going to show you how to do it. So at home, you can follow along and do a single batch. I'm going to be doing a double batch today because I want extra loaf to keep in the freezer on hand for next week. But we're going to start. I'm going to let you know what the ingredients are that you're going to need. I have a bowl for doing my wet ingredients and my yeast. And then I've got my KitchenAid mixer with the dough hook attachment. And you could do this by hand. You could do this with a Bosch, with whatever kind of mixer you have. The important thing is just that you have a way to knead it. And for me, that's my KitchenAid. This is a 6-quart. And so it fits comfortably up to a 4 times batch of this bread recipe. Probably could do even a 5 times batch. But that's the most I've ever made in my KitchenAid. I've got my yeast. This is active dry yeast that I keep in the fridge. Got molasses for flavor, honey for flavor, a little bit of olive oil just to help it not stick in the pan. Got some salt, and then I've got whole milk. You can also substitute almond milk. I have done that before and it works good. And then a stick of butter. If you have a thermometer, that'll be helpful for measuring the temperature of the water to make sure that it's the right temperature for our yeast to be able to start to grow. If not, that's okay. You can do it in the microwave. Usually about 90 seconds, heating up the liquid will do the trick to get it as warm as you need it. I've also got my bread pans. These are just your standard buy at the grocery store kind of bread pans. They're nothing special or fancy. I think we bought these at Walmart, and I've got 2 because this is going to be a double batch, but you can also just have 1, make a single batch. And then we've got our measuring cups. So my intention is that if you're following along, you can just do this with me and then pause when we need to wait for things to rise or when we need to wait for them to bake. And that way by the end of this video tutorial, you'll just have some bread just like I will. So let's get started. First, you're gonna want 1 cup of water if you're doing a single batch, 2 cups if you're doing a double batch. So I'm just gonna get some water. All right, I got my water. And then we're gonna add milk. A 1/4 cup of milk if you're doing a single batch, a 1/2 cup if you're doing a double batch. All right, now we're gonna add our flavors, our sweeteners. So the honey, this is for sweetness, and it's to help activate the yeast because it's sugar. So we're gonna do it's 3 tablespoons if you're doing a single batch, 6 tablespoons if you're doing a double batch. So that's gonna be, for me, since I'm doing a double batch, it's gonna be about a 1/4 cup and a 1/2. A 1/4 cup is 4 tablespoons. Alrighty. And then I'm gonna grab a little spatula to scrape that out. Okay, got that honey going in. There we go. And then I'm gonna do 2 more tablespoons. And honestly, you can eyeball this too. It doesn't have to be super exact, so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm just gonna eyeball this. That's about 1 tablespoon. That's about 2 tablespoons. Now, molasses. I like to add molasses for flavor. This is something that I didn't find in the original recipes I looked through, but I wanted a bread that had kind of like a rich taste to it. And the molasses I found really adds kind of that hint I was looking for without just like dumping tons of sugar into it. So I like to do like a tablespoon to 2 tablespoons of molasses for a single batch, 2 to 4 if you're doing a double batch. I'm just gonna eyeball this, so about like 1 tablespoon and about 2 tablespoons, and we'll give it a little extra, and that should do the trick. So I think total I went for about 3 tablespoons for my double batch. So you can do a tablespoon and a half if you're doing a single batch. Now we're going to heat this up to 115 degrees, and that'll be the right temperature for our yeast to be able to start to bloom. And I'm just going to put it in the microwave for about 90 seconds, and then I'll check it with my thermometer. While that's heating up, I'm going to start getting the dry ingredients ready. If you're doing a single batch, you're going to do 2 cups of wheat flour, 1 cup of bread flour. If you don't have bread flour on hand, you can use all-purpose flour. That's my little kiddo. You can use all-purpose flour. It'll just have a little bit drier of a texture. Bread flour has higher protein in it, and the protein is what makes things stretchy. It is the structure of baked goods. So if you use bread flour, it actually does make a really big difference in the final texture of your product. I just kind of lightly scoop. I don't want it to be like a jam-packed scoop. I'm just gonna fluff it and lightly scoop 1 cup. It's 2 cups of wheat flour if you're doing a single batch, and then I'm gonna do 4 since I'm doing a double batch. So 1, 2, 3, and then 4. Okay, wheat flour is in. And now for the bread flour, it's 1 cup of bread flour if you're doing a single batch, 2 cups if you're doing a double batch. So I'm just gonna scoop out my 2 cups. The first time I made this, it took a lot of concentration, but now that I've made it so many times, like weekly, I haven't bought store-bought bread in months. And I just, once a week, sometimes twice a week if I do a bigger batch, or sometimes once every 2 weeks if I do a bigger batch, I'm able to just crank out this bread, and we've got bread, and it has changed everything for my little one's digestion, and I've felt it too. It's been amazing. You're gonna do a teaspoon and a half of salt. So this is a half teaspoon, so 3 of these, 1, 2, 3. That's a teaspoon and a half. I'm doing a double batch. 1, 2, 3. Salt for flavor. All right, and then I'm just gonna let that start to mix a little bit. Just get nice and combined. And then it's time to check on our liquid mixture. So this is much warmer than like lukewarm. It's like that would be nice temperature for like a bathtub, I would say. I'm just gonna use my thermometer to stir it around. You'll see the molasses and the honey start to get incorporated. We want it to be 115 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Still going up. Might need to cool down a little bit. So mine is at 117 degrees right now. I'm just gonna let it cool for just a second. A few degrees can make a big difference, not too much, because honestly, when you're working with yeast, this is something I learned from Erin McDowell, who is amazing at bread and pies and everything complicated in the baking world. But the temperature really just depends, like the rate that the yeast will start to bloom, and you can kind of manipulate that to your advantage. Now that it's been sitting here, it's on a really cool table. It's actually gone right down to 115. So 115 degrees, that's perfect. I've got my yeast. If you're doing a single batch, then you want 2 teaspoons and a quarter. So 2 1/4 teaspoon. This is my half teaspoon, so I need 1, 2, that's 1 teaspoon. 3, 4, that's 2 teaspoons, and then a quarter. So that's a single batch. I'm doing a double batch, so I need 2 1/4 teaspoons more. So 1, 2, that's 1 teaspoon, 2, 3, that's 2 teaspoons, and 1/4. I'm gonna mix this up. We're gonna let it rise and kind of do its thing for maybe 8 minutes. And you'll start to see that fermentation happening on top. It should start to bubble. I'm gonna move it off of my cold table so that it doesn't halt the yeast growth. I'm just gonna put it right here next to my KitchenAid. I'm gonna bring you a little bit closer now. All right, while we're waiting for that to start to bubble, I'm gonna get my pans ready. We're not gonna knead them for a sec because we still have to, make the dough, let it rise for about an hour, and then we'll form it, we'll put it in the pans, it'll rise for another 30 minutes, and then we'll bake it for an hour. So it's a bit of a process. It's not hard. You just have to know when you need to check back in and do the next step of the process. Like if you're at home, you could do this part and then let it rise for an hour while you do laundry, while you go to the park. You don't have to be here in the kitchen. So this is bubbling. I'm just gonna take a little bit of my olive oil. I like the texture that olive oil gives. And I'm just gonna put a little drop into each pan. I would say that's about a teaspoon of olive oil. Just about a teaspoon. And then I'm gonna take a paper towel and I'm just gonna rub it around. Make sure you get the sides and the corners so that your bread doesn't stick. But if you do this part right, then you shouldn't have any problem getting your bread out of the pan. We'll have nice loaves. All right, that one's all greased. Let's do this other one. Get all the corners. Okay, those 2 are ready to go. And then also, while this is working its magic, I'm gonna just clean up some of my mess. I like to clean up as I go. Take a second to throw your measuring cups in the sink. We're not gonna need anything else. We've got our butter that we'll measure, but everything else has been used, so you can put everything away. And this is gonna start to bubble. So you can watch that bubble while I tidy up. All right, this has been sitting for about 8-ish minutes while we've been cleaning up. And so we're ready to pour it in to our dry mixture. And then we're gonna add 3 tablespoons of butter if you're doing a single batch, 6 tablespoons of butter if you're doing a double batch. Got my little kitchen helper with me today. Let's see, zooming out. Come on over. All right, I'm just gonna have this mix while I pour it in. And then I've got my spatula so I can make sure all of it makes it into the bowl. All right, and then I'm gonna do 6 tablespoons. I'm gonna cut it up into pieces and just kind of put them in one at a time so it doesn't have just this big giant butter ball. I want it to be nicely distributed. Right there. Okay. So again, 3 tablespoons if you're doing a single batch, 6 tablespoons if you're doing a double batch. And this butter is nice and soft. I just put it in the microwave for about 5 to 10 seconds. Just in small increments until it was nice and soft. All right, I'm gonna turn this up a little bit. We wanna incorporate it until it becomes a nice ball of dough, and your dough ball should not be super sticky. It should be easy to work with without having to put flour down or on your hands. It kind of has a tackiness to it, but it is not sticky. I'm gonna scrape down, make sure all my flour is getting incorporated in there. And you can easily do this with your hands as well. We're just gonna knead it until it's very nice and smooth in a nice dough ball. Mine will start to kind of gather around the dough hook as we mix. Okay, let's mix that again. It should take about 7 to 8 minutes to get this all mixed, depending on the speed of your mixer and what method you're using to mix. But that's usually about how long it takes mine. I can tell my dough feels sticky. It's not quite forming that dough ball that I want. And it's getting there, but it's still a little bit stickier than I want. So I might even add a little sprinkle extra of my flour. You can do either wheat or bread, but just a little bit of extra to give that the texture it's supposed to have. All right, adding just a little bit of flour in there, a little bit at a time. Oh, my hook came off. Let's get that back where it's supposed to be. There we go. There we go. That's better. That's what we're looking for. A nice dough ball like that. All right, I'm going to give it one more scrape down to get that bottom bit. Make sure it's all getting incorporated. It shouldn't stick to your spatula at all. It should just come right off. Okay, there you go. Alright, I'm gonna let that incorporate for just a second longer. Oh yeah, that's still like really sticky. I think it needs more flour. See how it's coming off on my hand? It shouldn't really do that. It should be able to come out. So now that I've actually felt it, it needs a little bit more flour still. Alright, let's give that a little sprinkle extra. Oh, raise it up. I'm gonna call that good. Okay. I'm gonna just pour this out onto the counter, and then we're gonna oil the bowl so that it won't stick to the bowl as it rises. And then we're gonna cover it and let it rise for 1 hour. And you're just looking at it? Well, I don't want you to get yourself cut. So can you please put it back? Over there. Yeah, I know. I just don't want you to get cut. Alright. Oh, yeah. Still a little bit stickier than I would like, but I also don't want to overdo it. Alright, I'm going to put a little bit of oil into my bowl. I'm just going to use a paper towel. So a little bit of oil went into the bowl. Just going to smear that around. A little bit more. Pop my dough right in. I'm just going to turn it around and just kind of coat it in the oil. That way it won't stick to the bowl as it rises. Alright, now you can cover up your bread bowl with a microfiber towel or plastic wrap. I'm just going to do plastic wrap today. And then we're gonna give it 1 hour to rise. Make sure it's not sitting on like a cold table over vent, which is what my table over here is. I'm just gonna leave it nice and warm here on the counter. And we're gonna let it, it's just about gonna double in size. So it's gonna, well, this is a smaller batch, so it won't quite get to the top of my bowl, but it will double in size. So we're just gonna let that sit right there, get nice and warm. This is a good place to pause your video because we've got an hour to wait. Go do something else while you're waiting on this. Get the dishes done or whatever else you need to do, but set your timer for 1 hour so you know to come back in an hour. All right, the bread has now doubled in size. It's risen quite a bit, and we're ready to shape it, put it in the pans, and then it'll rise for another 30 minutes before we're ready to bake. So here we go. If you can hear old MacDonald in the background, that's my little guy watching a show. So I should be able to just plop that right out onto the counter. And the first thing we're gonna do, I'm just gonna knead it just a little bit. I like to grab the sides and pull it around and under, giving me like a smooth top to work with. And then we gotta cut it in half. So I'm just gonna eyeball it. I'm gonna grab my knife, and you could do this where you put it on a scale and measure it perfectly, but I'm just gonna eyeball it right down the middle. Just grab half of that. Yeah, this feels pretty good. All right, so I'm gonna start with one. And again, I take the edges and I just tuck them under. Oh, it's a little bit sticky. So my dough's a little stickier than usually I like it to be, but it should be just fine. So see how I'm tucking the edges under so that I've got a smooth top. That's gonna give you that nice smooth top of the loaf. And then I'm gonna roll it out just a little bit, kind of into a log. If you can, the width of your pan. And then I'm gonna just lay it right in there, just like that. Just like that. Do the same thing to the second one. I'm just gonna tuck those ends under, tucking them down in, creating a nice smooth top to our bread. So there's where the ends are going. And then I'm just gonna roll it out a little bit, making that smooth top. And then it's ready to go into our pan. So I've got loaf number 2. All right, we're gonna cover these up again with plastic wrap. I'm just gonna try and use the same one that I did before. That should be fine. And then we've got 30 minutes. You want these to reach close to the top edge of your bread pan. And that's when they're ready to go in. So we'll give these guys another 30 minutes. All right, these have risen as much as they need to. Got 2 nice loaves. They're ready to go in. The oven is preheated to 350, and these are gonna bake for about 40 minutes. And then they'll be ready to come out. So in they go. Oh yeah. Look at that. Beautiful. So good. Oh, perfect loaves. What do you think? Oh, I'm gonna let these cool for a little bit so that I can actually pick them up without oven mitts. And then once they've cooled that far, I'll pop them out of the pan. But oh, these look and smell so good. All right, ready to pull these out. If yours is a little bit stuck to the edges, you can run a butter knife around the edges. Give it some taps to loosen up the bottom. Oh, and there it is. It's beautiful. Oh my gosh. So good, so good.
What's so big?
My loaf of bread. It's a beautiful loaf of bread.
Do we eat it?
We're gonna. Ooh. Ah, yeah. And there you have it. You'll never buy store-bought bread again. I like to slice these, wrap them up, and then I keep one out on the counter and put the rest in the freezer. I'd like to say I know how long these last in the freezer, but we always eat them all before 2 weeks is up. But they will thaw out nicely. Sometimes we don't want to just bake for ourselves. We want to take it a step further and create a thriving business around our passion for baking in the kitchen. And if you're looking to do that, look no further than the Business School for Bakers, an online program geared exactly towards home bakers like you to learn how to price, market, strategize so you can make an income doing what you love. Tap the link in the video description if you want to find out more, and I'll see you inside.